Hey, I want to welcome you today to the Link Talks podcast. And I'm here today with Pastor Tim Forsthoff and his son, Lucas. We're going to have a great conversation today. These are some giants in the faith, and I love their story. And so I believe you're going to receive a lot from this today. But let's start, first of all, Tim, I love that you're representing the Link family today.
I'm all in. I'm all in, Bobby.
You are all in.
I'm a Link man.
Yeah, man. So tell us a little bit, first of all, about how you established Cornerstone Church in Highland, Michigan. Tell us a little bit about that. And then tell us a little bit about how long you've been a part of Link.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, I've been pastoring Cornerstone for 38 years. My wife and I came up in 1985. Number one son was 1 year of age. My pastor that I got saved under from Dayton, Ohio, he resigned the church and came up to Highland to pastor West Highland Church. It was a Baptist church, and they released him after a couple of years, and a group left with them and established Cornerstone Church. And he pastored Cornerstone Church for a couple of years, but he saw no evidence of real growth or possibilities of growth. And I was his youth pastor down in Dayton, Ohio. And so when he was going to leave, he recommended me to this little tiny church of 50 people that had been in existence for a couple of years. And
now, had you ever been to Michigan prior to that?
Well, my sister and her husband lived in Ypsilanti briefly, so I came up then.
So you knew a little bit about what you were getting into when moving from the South up to the
Ohio. I guess Ohio is considered the Midwest and a northern state, but you know what? The culture is a little bit different up in Michigan, sure. And Highland is a kind of a country or rural setting, and we were used to suburban setting, and so a lot of distance there and horse farms and not much population. But you know what? I came up in 1985 at age 27, and the Lord started, after about 6 months, the Lord started adding to our church. I was surprised as anybody when I'd see a new person come to church, then the next Sunday they'd come back. I was, what in the world? They must have liked it. It was just so surprising.
Yeah,
that's how we got started.
We always like to see them come back. That's for sure. All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about your relationship with Lucas and how you guys do ministry together. So Lucas, tell us a little bit about, you came on staff, what year, and kind of tell us a little bit about how you got involved in ministry at Cornerstone.
Yeah, I went off to college, Oral Roberts University, and then
ORU, baby.
Yep, ORU. Graduated 2007, and he called me. You know, I just remember having a phone conversation with him during my senior year and saying, you know, hey, I'd like to have you come back to Cornerstone. And he said, we want to start an internship program. We want you to start an internship program, is what he said. And essentially, you know, this is what we were thinking it could look like. It's for people who graduate high school. They'll do our internship program. And I had never even thought of that. Actually, at the time in 2007, that was kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
It's very popular now.
Yeah.
But really kind of, I had no idea what that even meant, what that could look like.
Yeah.
And so through some prayer, and I was engaged to who's now my wife, Jen, at the time. And I actually remember, you know, hey, Jen, maybe going back to Michigan. She just was like, shut it down right away.
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't want to leave Tulsa. She didn't want to leave her family.
I never knew that she had shut it down right away. Thank you for sharing that.
Shut it down.
Yes.
Well, we won't go into that, right?
Yeah. So, but through prayer, she heard the Lord speak to her.
Yeah.
And so I had heard the Lord speak to me too. So I came up to Michigan in 2007. She actually stayed down in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And she was a teacher, got a job teaching. We were just engaged. Then we got married in 2008. And of course, you know, we lived together in Michigan after we got married.
Yeah.
So I've been at the church.
We're glad for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Right. But I've been at the church 17 years as far as staff member goes. And then Jen's been.
So prior to that phone call, had you ever thought about, you know, working alongside your dad in ministry? I mean,
not really.
Yeah.
Not really. When I was in Tulsa at the time, I was serving at a church as a youth pastor for a few years.
Okay.
And then that pastor was giving me an offer to to be a pastor there, a youth pastor there full time, and to do other things. And I was considering that. I was considering other options kind of in the area where I was making connections and I was just down there for so many years that I had really developed connections. And so I just was considering that.
Yeah.
And so when they got the phone call to come up and work, I was kind of like, okay. And then the job offer was like internship director.
Kind of vague.
Yeah, a little like, no, I never thought.
Could you be a little bit more specific, Dad?
I just never thought like you could do that with your life,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I remember doing that, and was some of my favorite years being an intern director.
Yeah. So I'm sure there's some dynamics that get into play when you're working directly with your son, and you've got a congregation. They're probably thinking one thing and you're thinking another thing. A lot of times I remember coaching baseball, right? I coached my son in Little League baseball, and I looked around at other teams, and you could see where dads were making sure that their sons got to play the premier position, pitcher, shortstop, whatever. And it's kind of like in my brain, I almost went counterculture to that. It's almost like I was determined that my son would not, be looked at as the coach's son. And I probably did a lot of damage to him in the process, but I remember just that tension, you know what I'm saying? And I'm sure you face that, bringing your son on the staff. Talk to us a little bit about maybe some of that dynamic.
Well, there is tension there. The charge of nepotism, you certainly are aware of that you prefer or favor your own family, your children. They don't deserve it, but you favor them because they're blood. And so I was always very sensitive to that. And, my wife and I would be praying about, what is the will of the Lord? Is this really of God? We would watch Luke when Luke was in high school. He was every year from 9th grade to 12th grade, getting stronger in the Lord. Then he went off to Oral Roberts University, and I would tell my wife that, I would be interested in Luke as coming back and serving with me. But I felt like he needed to grow in his passion for the Lord, grow in his relationship with God. And so I'd always watch him at Oral Roberts, and I just saw every year he was in high school, then every year in Oral Roberts. I just felt like that small fire turned into a large fire in his heart for the Lord. And I remember telling my wife, Luke has the necessary passion that I look for in a hiree.
Yeah.
And so when he graduated, I really felt like it was of the Lord, of course, the will of God. And so when they come on staff, because all of my children have worked for me,
So let me pause you right there.
Yeah.
So you're processing your son's spiritual growth.
Yes.
Okay. And you're seeing the Lord do a work in his life.
Yes.
Now he's about to graduate. You see he's already in ministry.
Yes.
Working with that church there in Tulsa. Did you create this position for him, or was this a position that, you felt like God was opening up to someone?
Well, probably, maybe a little bit of both. At the time, our youth group was in a revival. We had a revival amongst junior high and high schoolers at our church, where we were attracting 500 teenagers every Wednesday.
Now, is that the time where your son-in-law and daughter were?
Yeah, Jake and Hannah were our youth pastors, yes. And it was legit revival happening, and God had given us a prophetic word that we were going to raise up a generation, the next generation, and that we were to teach and instruct them. And so I wanted to offer something in our church as a next step from high school before they go off to college. And so we felt like that was of the Lord. And, but you need somebody.
Yeah.
It's not the program that accomplishes it. It's the leader of the program. And so I was watching Luke from a distance, seeing his fruitfulness in the different places he served when he was down there in Tulsa. Also watching his passion for the Lord. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, that's very important to me. And so when the time was right, I felt like this would do great. I always had a great relationship with him. I thought it would work. But, when you bring your children on, you need to see fruitfulness, because when people see that they're fruitful and serving the Lord with character, then the charge of nepotism, it just falls away.
Yeah.
And so with all my children, that was the case.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a lot of kickback because they've been very fruitful and have walked with integrity.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful
Lucas,
for that.
as you came on staff, did you feel a little of that pressure of nepotism? And how did you approach that in your personal life? And then maybe how did you approach that like in your leadership style?
Well, my advice would be to any maybe like pastor's kid that's coming on staff. I can look into the camera and say this one is the most important thing you could do is do your job well.
Yeah.
That's it. But that goes beyond pastor's kids.
Yeah.
That goes to any staff member in any job, in any dynamic, in any system, platform, whatever you're doing with your life. You better do your job well.
Yeah.
And people are watching you, but like you've got to understand, being a pastor's kid, people have watched you your entire life. So it didn't feel different in my heart when I took the job, but at the same time, there's pressure. There's pressure. And I'm not going to say like extra pressure. I think if you take a job, no matter what, there's pressure.
Yeah.
So, but you feel it. You feel it. You want success. But I would say that I never got dysfunctional in my mind or heart about it all. I just kind of kept it before the Lord. And, that's really important to do.
Yeah.
It's just keep it before the Lord. He keeps your heart right.
Yeah.
And put your head down and get to work. Connect with people. Build those relationships.
What do you think are some of the keys to your success in those early days? Because you're brought on staff, you're brought into a position that it's not common in those days in the church. Now you got to build this department, and you've got your dad over here. He has a particular type of leadership style. Maybe you don't emulate that.
Probably don't emulate that the same. I mean, it's hard to find two people exactly the same, even if they're father and son.
Yeah.
So different leadership styles, but thankfully I felt a call to the Lord to work with young adults. So when I was asked to take that position, it felt like confirmation from a bit of my calling.
Okay.
And I was very excited to work with college age kids. I was young myself. I mean, I had just graduated college. I felt like a college kid. So when I was talking to people who had graduated high school, it felt like I was talking to my friends. And we were only probably 3 years of age apart at some aspects of these kids at their early days. Those first years, I would say the key to success was recruiting and building relationships with the interns. Then once you built those relationships, the word spread about the experience.
Yeah.
That would have been the key to success.
What do you think is the biggest contrast in your leadership style and your dad's leadership style?
Yeah, we're different. I mean, I think it comes across in even how we preach. I would actually say I'm more mirror my mother in my leadership and my preaching dynamics. My mom's sitting over there. Would you say that, Mom? She's shaking her head. Yeah. So so we're different in that aspect. He's if you look at his message notes, point 1 and ABC 1, 2, 3. Point 2 ABC 1, 2, 3. Point 3. Yeah. You look at my message notes, it just looks like I journaled. There's no 1s or 2s or A's or B's. It looks like I journaled and I kind of speak from my heart more. So very different in how we lead, deliver our preaching. But I think it's healthy.
Yeah. Good. In a situation like this, there's several layers of dynamics that are involved. And I would say even if you're leading a team, these dynamics would be involved, but yet at some level, you have a different dynamic because you are father and son. But, working with teams, working with our staff, working with people, maybe even in your departments, you have these levels of leadership. You've got the church, you got your family, you got your personal relationships that are involved. But you have these dynamics of you're the boss, you're the dad, you're the pastor. Talk a little bit about how did you handle that dynamic, and maybe even some principles that someone here could use in leading their departments, because there are those layers. We have to protect our own family time as we're in ministry and things like that. But talk about that.
Well, it's been a learning process. Obviously, I first hired my son-in-law and my daughter, and they worked with me for 10 years. And then Luke was added on, and his wife. And so it's a learning experience, as with everything. But if you're going to hire them on, you have to be their pastor and boss. But at the end of the day, the relationship that will last is parental, father, son, or father, daughter, that family relationship.
Yeah.
You're not to show partiality, with people, but, I love my family more than I do my staff.
Yeah.
More than I do my congregation. And so I try not to be more demanding on like my son than anybody else, nor do I try to be more lenient. I do try to just place on him the demands I do any other staff person. But I care more about my relationship with him than I do anybody else on staff, because he's my son. And a fourth dynamic there, he's my friend.
Yeah.
When your children become adults, you're always their father, but you also can become like friends.
Yeah.
And enjoy one another's company. And so it's been a learning experience. I just think that you have to prioritize the relationship. You have to prioritize walking in the Spirit, having integrity in your heart. And this, I think, I talked to you a little bit before we began taping. This is, I think, is really a key in a relationship with your children, especially father, son. Jesus says the son honors the father. And then they also said the father honors the son. And I think honor is so key. If you have that in your heart, it will work.
Yeah.
You'll be able to work through things. You'll be able to honor one another, make room for one another, respect one another, forgive one another, work through things together. You have each other's back. There's loyalty there. And like I know my son is loyal to me, not only as a father, but as the pastor.
Yeah.
And I have his back as well. But that sense of honor, of preferring one another, that is so important.
Yeah.
I know sometimes it doesn't work, father-son or father-daughter, whatever, family relationships, but the honoring is what, to me, is a key.
Yeah. I'm thinking of my own family. There's times my daughter works with me in the Link organization, and there's times we don't see eye to eye. There's times when a conflict arises, and there's a challenge in the relationship. How did you manage, maybe some difficult times? Maybe give us an example of a difficult time that you had, and maybe how you process that through, maybe from the perspective of being a boss, and then, following that up with being a father. Talk to us a little bit about a dynamic like that.
Okay. Well, we were kind of talking about these things ahead of time to be prepared. But my son mentioned time during COVID, and I had the staff together. We're going to tape, and he and another staff person were a little late getting us set up for the big taping. And it was during COVID, a lot of pressure. COVID was leadership intensive, and I got really mad at my son and this other staff member. And about 3 hours then went by, and I felt convicted of the Holy Spirit. So I texted her and apologized to her, asked her to forgive me. I texted my son, asked him to forgive me. And then we had a conversation together afterwards and worked through it. But I actually had to humble myself and admit that I was wrong and ask for forgiveness. And that's how I handled it. I mean, you have to have humility there, right?
Exactly. There's times when we're leading, maybe you're leading in your department, leading in, your family, and you're the lead dog, so to speak, and we make mistakes. We all make mistakes, Sometimes we lose our temper. Sometimes we, put pressure or undue pressure on people. And I think humility is a key part of that we're willing to, as leaders, humble ourselves and say, hey, I'm sorry for going down that road.
Plus Luke, he serves at a high level.
Yeah.
It's not like, I'm having to correct him or, he is not a ball dropper. He's responsible. He's passionate for the Lord. He relates well to people. He doesn't cause trouble, a relational conflict, things like this to where I need to talk to him. I need to work it through with him. And so, he's a great blessing in that way. Yeah. And I think when I hear other pastors and talking about their children and issues that they've had to deal with, big issues.
Yeah.
I've never really had to deal with that.
Well, you're blessed.
Yes, very blessed.
Luke, tell us how do you live that out from the son side of things? Talk a little bit about maybe even stresses that you felt in the process of being able to honor your father, because there's probably times that you'd rather slap him than honor him. I think all of us have those moments.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Let me hear about this. This would be great.
Yeah. It can be stressful and it can be difficult, but I would say no different than maybe a dynamic that anybody could be dealing with at their workplace right now with their boss or another coworker, honestly. And you've got to be wise and you've got to be prayed up at times. But at the same time, I feel like I'm a good employee and I bring way more to the table than I take away.
Yeah.
So I don't get yelled at a lot.
Yeah.
And so, or,
do you think you have a little bit of advantage in the relationship in the sense that the vision that your dad and mom have lived out and kind of what's in their heart? So
yeah.
You're almost able to preempt some things that might come down the pike that might be a frustration to a staff member or somebody like that.
Yeah. Actually, I remember this one time, I don't know if you remember this or not, but we were having a graduation service for all of our interns at a church on a Sunday. And for some reason or another, you were just like leading it was like we got to church early Sunday morning to just like walk through it with the interns in their cap and gowns, and you're going to go on stage, you're going to sit down, all these things. And it was a Sunday morning, you were preaching that day, and you were grumpy.
Imagine that. That's so unusual.
Yeah, and listen,
really.
When you're working with interns too, they don't understand. They can't actually see that he's grumpy.
Yeah.
And I can tell this guy is grumpy. Somebody's about to get bit.
Yeah.
And I can see it. See, I've got this advantage, right?
Yeah.
And so the rehearsal goes by and everything's fine. And they graduate that Sunday, and all this stuff. And I think Monday morning or something, I went into your office and I said, you don't have to do that. You don't have to run Sunday morning internship graduation practice anymore. We're going to take this off your plates. So there's some things you have as an advantage to say, I know it makes him grumpy. I know it makes him happy. I know the vision. I know what we're trying to do. And I've actually been able to, as staff members have thanked me for this, like some of the young staff.
Yeah.
I'll pull them aside and I'll be like, this is what Pastor Tim wants right here. Just stick to this, because I know being on staff after all these years or being his son for all these years. Yeah. You just know certain things, and you kind of like pick up on things or you protect things, this is making you grumpy. You don't have to do this anymore. I don't think you've run a graduation ceremony since. Do you remember that Sunday?
I don't remember being grumpy. I remember being a bright and shining light.
Yeah.
Bright and shining light.
No, yeah. Every Sunday, right?
Every Sunday.
Yeah.
It's a cross I bear.
So you guys have to do church and you got to do staff. And then you got to go to Sunday dinner. Do you guys ever do Sunday dinner together? Or
we used to.
Some kind of family gathering?
We used to, but we started having kids.
Okay.
Don't work anymore.
Yeah.
But we could probably start it up again.
Yeah.
Kids are a little older now.
How do you keep church out of your family dynamics?
Well, you know what? Sometimes we don't. I mean, the call of God is on all of our hearts, and the church is on all of our hearts. And if it's a Sunday dinner, a lot of times it was a great presence of the Lord and we're rejoicing, or something happened. And so it's just natural to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so we do talk about it. But at the same time, I try not to bring problems between each of us at that Sunday dinner.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we try to keep that out of there. And thankfully, through the years, there hasn't been that much of that.
Keep those to Monday morning, right?
Or a different time, a scheduled time to meet, and where you can process things and talk about things. And obviously, sometimes I think if you give it a little bit of time, a day or two, you can sleep on it, pray about it, puts things in better perspective, know better how to have that conversation to where it can be productive rather than maybe explosive, because you're too raw with it.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys a last word. Okay, so Tim, speak to some of our senior pastors. Speak to maybe leaders of departments that are dealing with family dynamics, and just give them a word of encouragement and give them maybe a word of advice.
Well, my word of advice is before they ever come on staff or a part of your team, make sure it's the will of God and it's just not you favoring them. Because if you know that it's the will of the Lord, then you can work through things. Also, remember the principle of honor. Honor your child, your son, your daughter, or honor your parent, your father, your mother. Make sure you always maintain that level of respect, where you put weight upon their opinion, where you value them. That would also be a word of advice. And then if there are issues, I suggest you deal with the big issues, lest they become even bigger. If they're minor issues, the Bible says love covers a multitude of sins. You don't have to make a deal about everything. A lot of things you can slide and just cover it in love and realize that's just a dynamic. But if it's an issue that you can't let slide, it's large enough to where you can't let slide. Like if I leave this thing, if I don't deal with this thing, it's going to eat away at what we're trying to do here. It'll be destructive. You have to deal with it, pray about it, speak the truth in love, practice humility and forgiveness, and working with your family can be the greatest blessing in the world.
Amen.
So that would be my encouragement. It can be a greatest blessing in the world. Working with my son and my daughter-in-law is a great, great blessing.
Lucas, one last word, one piece of advice.
Well, I'll speak to maybe the staff, the kids who are on staff then, right?
Yep.
So I would just say, if you're on staff with your parents or your father at the church, you must do your job well. That's your biggest asset, is doing your job well. If you're just leaning on, I'm the son and I'm never going to get fired, you're not going to do well. The church won't do well.
Yeah.
You do your job well. Get an anointing, preach well, lead well, do well, be successful, work as hard as you can, prove yourself worthy. And then the people will see that you're anointed man of God or woman of God, you're a great pastor, you're a great worship leader, whatever your job is, the people will lean into you. They're not, the people aren't dumb, Bobby.
Yeah.
They know if somebody's in the wrong position and it's nepotism. There's a meme out there. Ever seen this meme of the father and son meme?
No.
It's a pastor's meme. The father's this lion and it's like roaring. And then the other side, it says the son and it's a little kitty cat. And that can be true for a lot of places where it's just the son got the job because he was the son. He had nothing to give. Yeah. He wasn't there. But I hope that people, would say not that that's not me, that I'm not just this little kitty cat, but like, no, that you got to prove yourself.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank you today for joining the podcast. We believe we've shared some great insight and some principles.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
If I could say one thing to you today, I'd say, look at your life, be sure of your calling, and then honor those who are in leadership above you, honor those who walk alongside you, and honor those who serve maybe under you, under your leadership, and be the best you can be. And whether that's being a father, whether that's being a son, or whether that's being a staff member, be the best you that you can be, and have a great, great day.